Well, if you have something for taking notes, if you would grab it out, and let's jump in here to our study. Today we're going to be working our way through Psalm 23. And when I say working our way through, let me explain to you exactly what I'm talking about, because we're going to just basically comment quickly on verses 1 through 5, and we're going to spend our time in verse 6. So we are going to work our way through, but the investment of our time is going to be spent in verse 6 of Psalm 23. I believe this passage is especially appropriate for the last Sunday of a year. And the reason I feel that way, the reason I felt impressed to use this passage today is because there is one specific focus in this chapter. It alludes to a number of things, but the specific focus of the chapter is on the faithfulness of God. For many of us, 2025 has been a hard year. A lot of us, we've gone through some very trying, difficult things this year. We have endured a lot. We have suffered a lot. And it would be quite easy for us, if you're like me anyway, let me just turn it around and say, this is what I would do normally, is that I would just spend my time focusing on my problems. I would look back through the year, and I would look at all the ways that I faced difficulties, I faced hardships, I faced heartache, and felt betrayed or whatever else might have gone on through the process of the year. The problem with doing that is it gives me no hope. But if, on the other hand, I can do what the psalmist is doing in Psalm 23, if I can look back and realize, yes, I had a lot of problems, but what I see in the midst of my problems is the faithfulness of God, then all of a sudden, that which seems overwhelming in the year that just passed, and that which will become overwhelming in the year that comes, suddenly begins to settle down, because I recognize that in the midst of it all, God is faithful. God is not departed. God is not abandoned. God is faithful. I want to read to you the 6 verses, and I would like for you, as I read them to you, to listen for the way that David describes the faithfulness of God. Now, you may say, well, Tom, Psalm 23 is about a shepherd and sheep. I don't understand how we're going to learn anything about the faithfulness of God from that. But interestingly enough, God uses the experience of David to relay a very important message to us, to show us his relationship between himself and us, to show us his caring, loving relationship for us. And so there are a lot of ways in which we can spot the faithfulness of God in these verses. I want you to listen, pick that out, but pay very careful attention to verse 6, where we're going to spend our time this morning, okay? Let me read these to you. Psalm 23. David writes, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In the first 5 verses, I'm just going to pick out some very specific, very obvious ways in which God is shown to be faithful. He shows us God as provider. He shows us God as restorer, God as the guide, God as the protector, God as the giver of peace, and God as comfort. And certainly in the midst of difficulties and heartaches, these elements of the nature and the character of God are so specific and so important to us. But then he comes to verse 6, and it's almost as if he says, okay, I'm going to conclude this thought now. I'm going to bring this psalm to a conclusion, but before I do, I want to tell you in no uncertain terms about the faithfulness of God. When everything is said and done, I want you to have a clear grasp, a clear understanding of what I'm talking about when I talk about the faithfulness of God. If you're taking notes, and I hope you are, jot these 4 things down. 4 ways that David shows us the faithfulness of God in verse 6. Number 1 is this. He shows us that God's faithfulness is certain. He shows us that God's faithfulness is certain. He begins the last sentence by saying, surely, surely. Now, for many of us, if we were to use that word, we would be expressing it as a means of wishful thinking. Surely he's going to do that. Surely he's going to accomplish this because it's just the right thing to do. And so there would be somewhat of a question in mind as to whether or not it would actually be carried out. But that's not at all what David has in store for us. When David uses the word surely, he's using it as certainty. I am fully positive, there is no doubt whatsoever. Now here's the setting for this psalm. David has lived a lot of his life already. We don't know exactly how much of his life has already been lived, but it seems that there is a great percentage of his life still to go. But he's already gone through a lot of dark times, a lot of desperate times. He's made it now. He is king over the nation of Israel. He is the hero of the land in many ways, in battles and such. And here he is reflecting back over his life. He has the advantage in talking about the faithfulness of God in that he's not talking about what he's looking for in the future right now. He is definitely pointing us to that as well. But he's giving us indication of the faithfulness of God that he has experienced through his life for all of his life. He's seen the faithfulness of God. So for David, he's not hoping that God will be faithful. He's not hoping that God will bless him, but he is confident of it. David, he is expressing what he has experienced, what he is experiencing currently, and what he believes he will continue to experience because God is faithful. Number 1, he shows us that God's faithfulness is certain. But then he goes on to describe number 2. He shows us that God's faithfulness is relentless. God's faithfulness is relentless. He tells us, surely goodness and mercy will follow me. Goodness and mercy will follow me, will pursue me. Now, what does he mean when he uses the words goodness and mercy? If you're taking notes, jot these definitions down into your notes if you would. Goodness simply means God's active kindness, provision, and care. God's active kindness, provision, and care. It's not passive, it is very much active. God is fully involved in the process of providing and caring for his children. When we talk about the word mercy, we're talking about the steadfast love of God. That God's goodness and mercy, his steadfast love, is pursuing after his children, his unfailing grace. David is reflecting back on his life, and no doubt in this consideration, David is recalling the time in which he was being chased through the wilderness. And maybe you know the story, maybe you don't, but the king of Israel, David is now king, but at this time he probably reflecting back to the king of Israel was Saul. And for some reason, Saul hated and despised David to the point that he brought the entire army of Israel together to chase down this one guy. His intent was not just to scold him, but he hated him so desperately, his intent was to capture him and to put him to death. So David, while thinking about this and writing about this, could have been thinking about being pursued by King Saul and the army of Israel. And yet what we find is that's not at all what's on his mind. What is David considering? Considering that the goodness and mercy of God has been pursuing him. Now, isn't that interesting? I thought about this in relationship to what I said when we started the process, that a lot of times I get caught up in looking back and viewing only those things that happen negatively to me. I want to talk about those. I want people to know that I'm going through a hard time, But David has certainly taught me something that I think is huge. David has shown me that instead of focusing on that which did damage, he chose rather to focus on that which brought protection and safety and love into his life. David didn't want to focus on that which was bad. David wanted to focus on the God who brought him through that which was bad. It's so vital, it's so important that we learn to respond to God in that way, to look for the faithfulness of God in that which is evil, in that which is desperate, in that which is overwhelming. Look for the faithfulness of God. Because as we stand looking into a new year, and we're facing uncertainties in 2026, and we're facing problems and difficulties and hurts and betrayals in 2026, if we're not looking to the faithfulness of God, we'll just give up, we'll curl up, and we'll stop advancing. David said, I would rather focus my attention on the faithfulness of God. Remarkably, when David mentions the faithfulness of God, it wasn't that he would encounter it on the way. He wasn't saying there are these times when I encounter the goodness and the mercy of God, and I'm so thankful for it on my journey. David said, no, I turned around and looked in the middle of my darkness, and I saw the goodness and mercy of God pursuing me, relentlessly pursuing me. I asked myself, why would God do that? I mean, David was a really good guy. He had a lot of incredible qualities. He was a national hero, a war hero. He was the guy that God said, here's a man after my own heart. And maybe you could make a case, but well, okay, yeah, I see from a human perspective, this is a really good guy. I can understand the goodness and mercy of God pursuing him. But then we pause to remember that David wasn't perfect. David had his own struggles, didn't he? Committed adultery, murdered the husband of the lady he committed adultery with to hide his affair. Why would the goodness and the mercy of God pursue someone like that? Unless we get a little bit gloaty in our approach to looking at the life of David, let's just pause to consider ourselves for a minute. Why would the goodness and mercy of God ever pursue after me? I can't imagine that. We can rest in complete certainty, knowing that it's not because I'm deserving. And let's just be real, you're not either. But when we bring into the equation the character of Almighty God, then all of a sudden the light comes on. Because God's goodness and mercy pursuing me and pursuing you is not based upon how good I am or how much I can earn or qualify for that, but it's based solely upon who God is. God is faithful. God is faithful always, in every situation. Now, there is a distinction that needs to be drawn here, an understanding that we need to come to, because while the goodness and mercy of God are always pursuing the children of God, it is very possible for me to not experience the goodness and mercy of God to its fullest. My sin, my rebellion against God may cause me to withdraw from God, to move away from God. And as a result, even though He's still pursuing me, I'm no longer tasting the goodness and mercy of God as God intends me to, because now I have an appetite for something else. My heart has been drawn to something else. I'm no longer drawn to God. I'm no longer looking for His faithfulness. I'm no longer looking for His goodness and His mercy, because something else has my attention. Something else has my heart. And I miss out on what God has for me. The fear is that I divert my attention from God and I miss His blessing. But the blessing is that regardless of how I respond to God, He is still faithful to me. God is faithful. And so David shows us His faithfulness is certain. His faithfulness is relentless. And number 3, if you'll jot this down as well, he shows us that God's faithfulness is lifelong. God's faithfulness is lifelong. Jason, would you add some bass into my mic, please? I think that'll help me. David writes, "Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life." All the days of my life. The phrase here, all the days of my life, underscores the perpetual nature of God's care for us. That it's not something that, based upon my life, suddenly draws to a conclusion. Despite how unfaithful I am to God, God is still faithful, because that is His very nature. It's just who God is. It echoes the promise of His unending presence as we see it in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6. It says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you." Now, that was being written to the children of Israel. It's repeated in the New Testament for the church. But at this time, when it's being written to the children of Israel, you remember what's going on. They are having these times when they're pursuing after God, and then they're straying away from God. Pursuing after God, they're straying away from God. They've just spent 40 years wandering around in the wilderness because they rebelled against God. And what does he tell them? Despite the way you're acting, I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. The blessing for us here is that in the good times of life, God is faithful. In the difficult times of life, God is faithful. In the joy of life and in the sorrow of life, God remains faithful. There is no point in my life where all of a sudden God is no longer faithful to me. Thank you so much. There is no point in which that happens. God will always be faithful. Whether the enemy is sitting at my table, whether I face signs of aging and difficulties that are associated by that, whether there is suffering through relational issues, whether there is uncertainty with what the future holds with my health or my finances or whatever else may be going on, I can rest assured that God remains faithful. God's care is lifelong. It's not conditional. Let me jump quickly to the fourth one because I think it has to be said. It's included in the passage, and I think that even as David has laid it out for us very clearly up until now, he doesn't stop short of that which may be in the back of our minds. We see, number 4, that God's faithfulness is not only lifelong, but now we see it is eternal. God's faithfulness is eternal. David writes, I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. But David, you committed adultery. But I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. But David, you killed a guy. But I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. David, you did some pretty horrible things in your life, but I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Why? Not because I've done something to deserve it, but because God was faithful in my life, and God is faithful through all of eternity. The Apostle Paul said, if we have hope in this life only, none in the life to come, then we are of most people most miserable. We are of all people most miserable. But the blessing for us is that God's faithfulness is not only for us in the here and now, but it is for us when we step from this life into the next. God is faithful. So what do we do with this information? I think there's 2 things that I want to give you, 2 action steps, and I wish you'd jot these down as well, that I believe are very important for us to consider this morning. And then there's another one that I'm going to throw in as well. So what are our action points? Number 1 is that we live with confidence and not fear. We live with confidence and not fear. The way we live with confidence is to be certain of the faithfulness of God. To look back over our lives, to look in those dark times. Sometimes when we're in the middle of those dark times, it's hard to see God's faithfulness during that time. It doesn't mean that God's no longer faithful. It just means that right now we're kind of overwhelmed and we're kind of struggling. But even in those times, I am going to make it a point that from this time forward, I am going to focus on finding the faithfulness of God even in difficulties. I'm going to look for the faithfulness of God. I think it would be positive to write them down, to keep a little ledger and to write down the times when you spot the faithfulness of God, whether it be in the little things. Someone spoke kindly to me today, and I wasn't really expecting that from them. Or maybe it's in the big things. God did a miracle for me today. I can't describe why he would do it, but I know he did it. I've seen it firsthand. It is my experience that God is faithful. To live in confidence instead of fear. To live in fear is to dwell on that which is hurting us. To live in fear is to dwell upon those things that are overwhelming us. To live in confidence is to see the faithfulness of God in the middle of those things. And it is that prepares us for the future. So live in confidence and not fear. Understand that what's pursuing you is not judgment if you are a child of God. It is mercy. Number 2, live with hope, not worry. Live with hope, not worry. You may walk through the valley that is the darkest of your life. You may be caught in that right now. You may be in the most difficult time of your entire life right now. Just remember, you're not walking toward abandonment. Hard seasons do not cancel God's promises. They simply prove his faithfulness. And so instead of worrying about what you're in the middle of, instead of worrying about how this looks and what this is going to do, instead, live with hope that God is controlling the future. God is at work. Trust his plan. Now, the one I said I was going to throw in, if you are not a child of God, then that which pursues the child of God is not pursuing you. God, in his great kindness through his Spirit, may right now be drawing you to himself. But you have no promise of God being good to you, such as he is to his children. But if God is calling you to repentance today, God is inviting you into that which is eternal. God is inviting you into that which you can never lose, you can never forfeit. God is offering to you relationship with himself. He's offering to you eternal life. He's offering to you the ability to be removed from the judgment and wrath of a holy and righteous God. To no longer have to pay the debt of your own sin in the lake of fire for all of eternity. God is extending to you such kindness, such mercy. And I would invite you today to surrender to that.